Howdy, my name's Evan,
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Connor.
and we're so excited to welcome you all to today's edition of Tuesday Talks as we talk about Mark's sermon from this last Sunday, talking about how we are called to serve one another. I think it's just such a strong, powerful thing, especially when we talk about Christian community, about how we're called to serve. And all of us now being part of a church staff, I kind of wonder, what was the first role that you got to serve in as part of a church community?
Well, I think for me, I grew up in church. My parents were always serving in church. And so I would go along with them. And I remember doing everything from, it was a teeny tiny church. So I remember doing everything from sorting through the mail to turning pages for my mom, because she would be the church pianist. And so I would just sit up there and turn the pages for her. And even things like being in the kids choir, those were forms of service. And so I feel like I've done a lot of serving through the years through that example. I know definitely now it's something that I don't do because my parents make me do it anymore. I do it because, I find value in it myself. I love serving.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For me, similar story. I grew up in church for a long time, and parents grew up serving. They were a huge part of the church. They were on the board at one point, and for some reason, I said, you know what? I want to be an altar boy. I want to be a choir boy. I want to be an altar boy, and that's how I served. And my parents were like, okay, that's out of the blue, but let's encourage it. And they pushed me to do it. And I was really young at that point, but I would say the first one that kind of, I guess I realized that I was serving more than just a desire to do something. It was like a true act of service was when I was in 6th grade. I signed up to be a assistant crew leader for a VBS at the church I was at, and that was a huge undertaking for 6th grade me, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things, but it was a really rewarding experience, and it was a lot of fun, and it really kind of cemented my heart for serving in ministry.
Yeah, I love that. For me, I share a similar story. By the blessings of God, right? That was raised in a Christian family. So we're always part of church. My parents were small group leaders. My brother was there. And so my brother's about 2.5 years older than me, but 3 grades. So he was in youth before I was by a few years. And so distinctly remember the first real volunteer role I had at my church was I started with my brother because he was the head of the setup teardown crew for the youth. As a 7th grader, because that was the church. It was a growing church at the time. And what that meant was he wasn't comfortable recruiting other people, but he could tell his little brother, his little 5th grade brother who wasn't even in the youth, that, hey, you're now my team. So me and him would set up the chairs in the youth room every single Sunday. That was the thing. So even before I was part of the youth at my church growing up, I was part of the setup teardown crew, and we would set up the chairs. So I can tell about angles and how to line up chairs walking between the aisles, how to get down bleachers when they weigh like twice your size. And I loved it. And it was a really cool way to start serving with my hands. It was really cool, and then to see people come and sit. And they kind of had this opportunity from that to start doing small group leading for little kids. So I kind of look back on that fondly. It's this weird sort of thing when I think back. But I think something that started with my heart because of that was kind of my brother voluntold me, right? It often happens to church families and think of it, you've been voluntold for something. That I think service became a compulsion rather than something we do. And so I just kind of wonder, going along the lines of Galatians 5:13, right? Serve each one another out of love. Yeah. When was that kind of shift in your life where it wasn't a compulsion? You didn't serve because you were forced to do it, but you served just because, man, you love the Lord and you feel that call and the way that it kind of fills you back up.
I think for me, a big part of it is one of the ways I continuously serve in church is by playing violin, and just having people come up to me after service and tell me that it meant something to them, that it made a difference to them, whether it was like that day or like I felt closer to God, because I heard you playing. And for a long time, I'm uncomfortable taking compliments sometimes. But that is something that makes me want to do it more, because it's like I'm doing this. For me, it's like this little thing. It's a chunk of time that I would already be at church, and it's doing something that I love to do, and then to hear that it makes a difference in people's lives, that is it's such a huge blessing.
Yeah.
Some of the other ways I serve too, it's with Celebrate Recovery, that's how I have kind of found my tribe of people. And like, I work to serve them, but it's mutual. There's also a lot of them serving me. And so we actually formed this really tight knit community because of that. And I don't think we would have that without actually serving each other.
Yeah, I love that. I also appreciate your violin playing. It's really cool. So I think violin's one of the coolest instruments. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I love listening to it on Sunday.
Yeah.
I really do. Finally, you mentioned being voluntold, though.
Yeah.
So a little bit later on in my serving career, I was just not super connected to the church. I kind of fell out of things for a little bit, and my mom one summer was like, "You're going to sign up for something. You're going to start serving," because I was a lazy eighth grader. Didn't do anything over summer. And I went to like an open house for volunteering, saw this easy up labeled tech, and I was like, I like technology. That's it. And the first weekend I like pushed off. They would send me a planning center request. I'm like, man, I don't want to be there for like 10 hours this weekend between 2 days. Like, it's too much. And then I went and I met the people and I saw like really the tangible benefits of what we're doing on a weekly basis, kind of really, I don't want to say making church happen, because that church can happen in a basement with 10 people.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't need audio equipment, you don't need all the high production stuff, but we're enabling church to happen in the way that these people are used to.
Yeah.
And making that difference, and that really kind of opened my eyes, and I fell in love with the community and just what we do, and I am still doing it to this day.
Yeah.
13 years later.
Wow.
So
It is so cool. And just that calm the spirit, right? To spur your mother to volunteer you, but it was right when
I'm
you
sure she'll laugh when she watches this.
Love it. I think for me, it was just, I think the longest time, all the way through middle school, it was kind of this compulsion thing. And I got a lot out of it, and I did a lot with elementary age small groups, and it was really great. But I specifically remember a lot of my background in working for churches has been special needs ministry for the longest time, because that's the way I could fill in roles, and there's a lot of need for that. And so I remember the first time ever I really felt that call was we just had a student in our congregation, in our group, or fifth and sixth graders, it's fourth and fifth graders that needed that help. And I remember being the student in there and expecting an adult to do something, because I'm like, okay, I'm a middle schooler. Like, there's got to be an adult that's going to do something, but continuously Ian, who's my buddy to this day, Ian and Chris are their brothers, and they're awesome, just didn't have a place. And I fell in the next week. I was like, someone's going to do something, and it's like, okay, Lord, I guess it's going to be me. And it wasn't out of compulsion. It was okay. I see this kid. I see his need. I see this brother in Christ that just needs someone to be his friend. And I went and did it, and I loved interacting and being a Christian and Ian. And so from that kind of became this love of just serving. And it was so rewarding. I can't tell you, if you've never got to interact, be with a student who has special needs or just needs that extra bit of love, it is so good and so rewarding. And it's the reason I am kind of here today is I felt that call and really learned that side of ministry and learned to love it. So if you are someone who struggles with that compulsion side of ministry, I want you to even hear, like, as staff, that's hard for us sometimes. I know all of us, we work our ministry job, right? What we do for our living, and then to think, okay, I'm going to come back for another program. Jenna does CR, and that just seems like another thing, but you love it.
I do. Although I will tell you, it's something I have to, I struggle with myself sometimes, because sometimes I get home from work on a Wednesday and I'm like, I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found is not, we're talking about volunteering a little
Sure.
bit. I tell my children that they're coming to Wednesday night. They're going to do kids worship. They're going to do middle school ministries.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that actually kinds of helps hold me accountable to coming here and making sure that I'm actually making sure that my soul gets fed.
Yeah.
Because it's I'm the type of person that I would put myself last everywhere and just burn out. Because that's the way God built me.
Yeah.
But it's serving is just man, it's like, talk about the sum being greater than the parts.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can describe how you're doing this thing, and it can be like, I've written letters to people, I've baked cookies for things that like really don't take a lot of effort or time, but then somehow God multiplies it into this huge blessing. And it's not just for the other person. Part of that like kind of comes back on you.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to explain that. It's a kingdom thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited. I'm getting plugged in with the middle school ministry here starting this next school year. I'm going to be a leader for small groups on Wednesday nights, and I'm super excited to pour into these kids and just kind of just raise the next generation, of Christian leaders. It's a service, and as like Mark said, it's. I'm not saying it's a compulsion, but it's a duty.
Sure.
Like as Christian adults, it is a duty for us to serve one another, and especially serve the youth and raise them up to be Christian leaders. Because without that leadership, some of these kids might not grow up in Christian homes. Some of these students might get invited by a friend who their parents might be in a messy divorce. They might be, who knows what their situation is. And that influence is so critical for these kids. And it's easy to think, oh, I'm just going to volunteer. And no, like you are serving the next generation, and you are serving the kingdom. And like Jenna said, the sum is so much greater than the parts, because just me, I'm not going to do much. But with all the other leaders and people around me just influencing these kids, we can really raise up a powerful next generation.
Yeah, I love that. Good thing is this church has opportunities. If you felt that call either through the sermon or through this talk, man, you feel that calling feeling out of love. Just man, I need to serve. I need to be part of this, raising the next generation, just being part of this church. And we have some tools and some needs. So Jenna is awesome in everything she does, and so she can help explain some of the ways that you can help get engaged and connected to serving opportunities.
So if you go to our weekly guide, which is chapelhillpc.org/guide, the fourth button down says ways to serve. If you click on that, it takes you to a tool, which is essentially kind of like doing an internet quiz. It kind of sees what you like, what you don't like, what your skills are. And at the end of that quiz, it will make suggestions for you of areas we have to serve in this church that might be right for you. Now, you get to make that decision. So even if it says, hey, we think you'd be good, like really good at kids ministry, and you're sitting there going, I really don't feel called to kids ministry. I'd rather work with the food ministries or help be on the security team. Of course you can make that choice. We have all the contact information at the end of that form, so you can contact the person in charge of that ministry area and get plugged in. And I mean, I'd love to say that when you're doing this tool and when you're contacting people, you're not making a lifetime rock solid, commitment to this. Really what it is you're calling and you're saying, hey, I'm interested in trying this out. Can I see if this serve opportunity fits for me? Because we're all called to serve differently. And so I would really encourage you, if you're listening to this and if you've done that serve tool, to go ahead and contact some of those ministry areas. And if you haven't done it, do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always contact me.
Yes.
I am always looking for people to come help out in productions, and it is not a commitment. Like that, as someone who regularly works with people wanting to serve, it is sometimes people come in and are like, yeah, no, this is not for me. It's too much. It's too high stress, too technical, whatever it may be. And I am never offended by that as a ministry leader. I would rather you find where you feel that your serving is both feeding yourself and benefiting the people you're serving. And that's such an important thing, because if you do end up in a role where you don't love what you're doing, it's going to feel like a compulsion and you're going to burn out. And that's never a good thing, but you see it all too often in the church.
Yeah. Man, I love that. And I love just the idea of, man, we are one body of Christ that is equipped in different ways. If there's one serving opportunity that doesn't work for you, that's awesome. That means the Lord has called someone else for it, and they're going to love that, and the Lord's equipped them for it. Don't feel like you have to fit just where this need always is. And if you can for a weekend, that's awesome, but it doesn't have to be your long-term thing. Feel where the Lord has called you and equipped you. That's where you should be. It's how you're going to benefit the body of Christ the most. But if you're not quite ready to make that, I'm ready to do this volunteer role week to week or any other commitment like that, church, maybe you can just do something this week to serve one person. Or maybe it's a random act of kindness. Maybe it's just looking at your household, your spouse, your children, your roommate or something. Something you can do easy. Maybe you do the dishes for your roommate that always leaves dishes in the sink and drives you crazy. Just do it for him. And it can be intentional, like, hey, did the dishes for you today. I hope that blesses you. You can say that. And it doesn't have to be the most evangelical. You don't have to give a gospel presentation. But by you just serving, by that overflow of doing something that isn't common in the culture, you'll witness so much of who the character of Christ is and the character of who God is. And people will be curious about him because you're not just telling them who Christ is. You're showing them
Yeah.
And I think it's super powerful. So I hope y'all feel inspired by this, that serving is something that is, you feel in your heart that you're called to do, and it's out of love, not compulsion. We're continuing our series One Another, so if you want to join us on Sundays at 9 or 10:30, we'd love to see you there. But y'all have a great rest of your week. See y'all.